Hi Dragons! So we're continuing with victimology. This is part 2. We left off at victim compensation programs, and I was telling you how a lot of people don't even know that they exist, but they exist in every state, federally as well. And we have a lot of different types of victims compensation. There is generally a big victim compensation fund. We have one for restitution and all other kinds of things as well. So this is where the state makes payments to the crime victim, and it was first introduced in the United Kingdom by Marjorie Fry in 1957. Those make great true and false or identify questions, or even matching. Ultimately, it failed, but soon it became a big issue around the world, and the UK did ultimately create a program that stuck, and that was in 1964. New Zealand then had the first compensation legislation and program in the world, beating out the UK from their own idea in 1963. And then, of course, UK adopted theirs. And then in the United States, it wasn't adopted by the whole country at first. First, it came from California, 1965, New York in 66, Hawaii in 67, Massachusetts in 68, federal government in 84, and then all the other states as well. So by 1989, we had 49 states that, did have a program, and now it's all over. And other countries, a lot of other countries have programs, but after all of that, Australia and Finland became really big as well. So that was a really good movement, the whole victim compensation program, but a lot of people don't even know that such a program exists, and it's not used as much as it could be, okay? Then another thing that moved victimology forward were legal reforms, because, victims really did need to reform the whole system, and there are things that victims have today that, are taken for granted, like, wow, we have this thing and that thing, and when you look back at what we didn't have back in the day, it's really shocking to see that we had this system in place for a long time, but not a lot of the safeguards. And we're going to talk about the Victims' Bill of Rights in a minute. So these were things that helped victims, like protecting the rape victim during a trial. So we developed something called a rape shield law, which meant that you couldn't bring up past sexual history or even past things or the character of the person, any of that. You couldn't bring that up because it protected the victim. It really had nothing to do with the case at hand. We had a mandating reporting system that came out of that, which is really kind of cool. So now you have anonymous tips. If you see something, you don't have to worry about someone coming after you if you made a report of like abuse or something. We create abuse registries, and those are ubiquitous. We have child abuse, domestic violence abuse. We even have animal abuse in Ohio, and it created guidelines for victims in court, what they were allowed to do, what they allowed to get, could they attend probation parole hearings, and we created a Victims' Bill of Rights, which serves to protect victims, like the traditional Bill of Rights as well. So then there were other factors coming into play, and they're still evolving. So other factors are just like miscellaneous things. So we couldn't foresee in the 60s the advent of the media and things like social media, okay? So we had a remarkable case in Massachusetts a few years ago where there was a young woman who kept egging on her boyfriend to commit suicide. And she did this primarily through texting and through Facebook. And he ended up killing himself, and the court found her guilty. So those kinds of things that we couldn't see before. He was the victim of that bullying. Bullying is another thing in school that is something that's protected now that, was just not even talked about in terms of this is a right. Also, schools have been encouraged to develop programs to address bullying where they didn't think that they had to, and they ended up being sued civilly. I remember this one kid was bullied in school, and he kept telling his parents this is what's happening, and his parents would talk to the school, and the school didn't do anything about it. They were like, well, bullying happens. And then the parents went to the school board and they didn't do anything about it. And one day the kid was like really, physically assaulted in a very horrible way. And the parents said, that's it, we're suing. And they sued the school system for like millions of dollars, and they won. So had the school just listened and addressed the situation, then they wouldn't have had that punishment, that fine for themselves. The good thing about that was that all the other schools were like, oh, that's not happening to us. And all these schools quickly fell in line to make policies. So that was a really kind of cool thing. So we've come a long way from the days when there were no books or research or reforms to today, okay? So today we have college classes in criminal justice, which we didn't have before. We had criminal justice curriculum. There is I teach in the police academy too, the state of Ohio, and there is a real strong curriculum that has a lot of academics in it and research in it. We have juvenile justice, majors. We have conferences, journals that are academic and also address practitioners in criminal justice. And we have victim services in every single state, mostly every big city and federal jurisdiction. And I will include on the PowerPoint a historical development in the 21st century so that you can see how they all developed and came about. So one of the big things that I alluded to before was the Victim's Bill of Rights, just like, the traditional Bill of Rights, which a lot of people don't even know their rights. It's a really sad thing, but they may be able to verbally mimic something like, the Miranda warning, you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can or will be used against you in a court of law, but they can't apply it to different situations, like I remember when my daughter was going off to school and I would have this conversation in front of her and in front of the teachers. And I would say, look, if a teacher ever accuses you of something and you don't want to talk to them, number one, they have to, by law, call a parent before they question you anyway. And if you are stuck in a principal's office or a teacher says something to you, I want you to look at them. And remember, I'm saying this right in front of the teacher. I want you to look at them and tell them, I have the right to remain silent. Please call my mother. And I didn't care what the teachers thought, but that's an application of the Miranda warning that a lot of people don't understand. Like, oh, if I get called to the principal's office, I don't have to answer them. No, you do not. That's your right under the, your Bill of Rights. So likewise, we had developed a Victim's Bill of Rights, and here's some of the things that are in it. The right to be treated with fairness and respect. The right for a timely disposition of the case. Sometimes a case will drag on forever and ever and ever, and you have to go down to the police department a million times. You have to talk to people before they stop paying attention to you. The right to be reasonably protected. You pay tax dollars in terms of salary for your police department, for the prosecutors, for all of those things. And that's a reasonable protection that you should expect. The right to notification. Like, when is the trial? When is my case coming up? What's the disposition of the trial? What's the sentence? All of that sort of thing. And that'll include, your offender is getting out of prison, so this is their release date, and do you want to be at the release hearing? There's all of that as well. The right to attend all court proceedings, which is a right for everybody to attend any proceeding because it's a public venue, but a lot of people thought, well, I don't have the right to be there, which you absolutely do. The right to communicate with the prosecution. This is your case, you're the victim. It's not going anywhere unless you talk. So you have the right to communicate with the prosecutor. The right to have input in any plea deals, making a victim impact statement. Okay. The right to make a statement during sentencing to the court, in front of everyone. The right to restitution. If you suffered some damage, you should be able to collect, compensation for it to make yourself whole again. And the right to information. The thing about restitution, I was sitting there watching the uprising on the Capitol, and I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, they broke that door. How much is that going to cost? The taxpayer shouldn't pay for that. If they're convicted, they should pay for that. That's the essence of restitution. So we're going to talk about the whole uprising and things like that, who should pay, who's the victims, all of that. And the right to any and all information that comes out of the trial. I'm talking about this Bill of Rights means not only what you get in the local newspaper or the TV, but everything, all of the stuff that's going on in the trial, you have the right to all that information that's coming from that trial. So the Crime Victims Act of 1984 was established the fund at the Treasury to have a way to pay for people's expenses and things that had happened to them. It provided grants for states for victims' compensation. It gives grants for programs that provide services for victims of crime. It imposes penalty assessments on convicted felons. If you're a defendant, not only do you have to serve your time, if this is a criminal case, you also have to pay back the damage that you did or any derivative damage that you did. This is what I was talking about, the insurrection at the Capitol. I can just imagine how much one of those doors cost that they broke up. And here's the thing, I'm going to tell you this throughout forever and ever if you have me for other classes. We are not the United States. We are the non-United States. We act as though we're 50 different kingdoms, and there's different laws in different states, like I told you before, with the insanity laws, and it's also the case with victims' compensation. You know, like you don't want, you know, we have free flow in this state. Like right now I'm in Indiana. What happens if something happens to me in Indiana and I'm from Ohio? You know, who pays for that compensation? You know, generally the state where the offense occurred. But, you know, like we need uniformity for all of our states. And this is just yet another area where, you know, we have to make sure that we have uniformity. So I included on slide 22 of the PowerPoint that I'll put up a bunch of different websites for you to explore that are really interesting. There's the National Association of Crime Victims stuff, and then there's some different things that I would like you to explore. The goals of the crime victims movement were definitely to protect victims, to give them information, to make them a better participant in the program, not only for their own sake, but for the sake of other people that they interface with, like, oh yeah, this is what I did and it really helped me, and it will make the whole system move better. Reparations for crime victims, compensation, things like that, to preserve the criminal justice system in a really good way. To have due process that is granted for everyone, every victim, every defendant, everyone, for every reason, okay? So our goal is to make the criminal justice system not just about the criminal and not just about the victim, but I think it should just be criminal justice and just leave it at that. And then the right to be treated with dignity and compassion, which is a very important part. And then on the end of the PowerPoint, you'll see figures and table. I put Van Hunting's typology in there, Mendelssohn's victim types, assumption of victim precipitation theories, Schaefer's victim precipitation theory, a precipitation grid that looked at their responsibilities from victims and offenders, and then some journals that when you go to do your major field project, you might consider looking at some of these journals if they apply to what you're doing. A bunch of different figures and tables, including landmark cases that you might be really interested in. And then last thing, the last slide, which I always found interesting as a student, was, okay, there's Van Henting and Wolfgang and Amir and Mendelssohn. What do those guys look like? So I put their pictures in there so you can see where all this stuff was coming from. So that's part 2 of the intro. So next Thursday, what is this? This is for Tuesday. So Thursday we will get into the next topic. So there you go. Enjoy this, and don't forget to do the forum that I will put up in there as well. And I will also put the PowerPoint and a lecture guide for you. So remember, I'll see you then on Thursday, and it's a great day to be a dragon.